Welcome and thank you for joining. This interview is part of a research article titled Ethical Risk of Generative AI in Education by Or Daniel and the advisor Dr. Rinat Rosenberg-Kima from the Technion Israel Institute of Technology. The availability of the interview along with the scientific article can benefit both the scientific and education communities. The interview content was not edited, only noise and pauses were removed. We thank all subject matter experts for contributing their knowledge and experience to this study. A link to the article and ways to contact us will be added to the information of this interview. Interview number 4 with Guy Philippe Goldstein, held on November 17, 2023, in English. Enjoy. So can you please state your name and also elaborate on your professional background and experience?
So my name is Guy Philippe Goldstein. I'm a lecturer at the School of Economic Warfare, with specialization in cyber power. I give a long lecture to many types of students actually on cyber power. I've also been writing a couple of research papers for the Institute for National Security Studies on cyber defense and diplomacy. I'm an advisor to PricewaterhouseCoopers in France, where I develop studies for PwC around cyber, the cost of cyber, the future of cyber. Also, I run prospective studies for PwC from time to time. And if I go, I'm also an advisor for a couple of VC funds, Expand Capital and another one that I cannot mention, but where I'm also advising on cyber. And beyond that, and more into prospective studies, I've been running a couple of what I've developed as prospective serious games for the French Defense Innovation Agency, developing future of warfare around the horizon of 2040 with new dimensions such as cognitive, such as cyber, with also dimensions of AI and so forth. And developing also this type of prospective serious games also for companies in the French defense industry and also in more traditional corporate environments. And last but not least, I'm also a fiction writer, and I've penned a novel that had a bit of traction actually in Israel, Babel Chat FS, Babel Minute Zero in French. And I refer to Professor Aviatar Matiana, Cybermania, essay or cyber power as it is in the French edition, where he mentioned the impact of this novel about a decade ago in Israel as an element of inspiration for lots of national security professionals in Israel dealing with cyber, including then Prime Minister Netanyahu. But other guys also.
Whoa. Amazing. So I need to buy that book.
Yeah, it's still sold, I guess, in
buy that.
Israel. Cybermania, that's the title in Israel, by Aviatar Matiana, Professor Aviatar Matiana.
Sure. So you have an amazing experience. Thank you for participating in this study. So thank you again, Guy.
Thank you for inviting me.
Well, of course. So in your view, what are the potential benefits or advantages of using generative AI technologies in education?
So I truly believe that generative AI is going to trigger an incredible revolution in education with potentially extremely deep and profound sociological effects on our advanced societies. I prefer to make this big splash statement, but I really want to be bold on that one. I'm not often bold actually on many of the technologies that I come across. Some actually I really poo-poo them. Don't get me started on blockchain or Bitcoin. Don't get me started even some element of AR, VR, whatnot. This one, in general, to me, and especially generative AI, for many different reasons, the natural language processing, which make it very easy to use, the wide range, which somehow it's encapsulated in language of domains of expertise that can be actually used via these large language models. The conversational bots, which makes it a new way, and we're happy to delve more into that in exchanging and getting information, or it's not new, but refresh, and something which is very deep, and I'll get to that. In education, we have but scratched the surface of what can be done with AI. But here, I'm not acting in a very, I don't have any studies, okay, and it's a very experimental field, so it just came out. So I'll start with my own experience, and then try to come out with, what we can see in other points. But I find it a remarkable system to orchestrate personalized path to learn whatever you want. When you go to Oxford or Cambridge, you may have a tutor, you have one person responsible with whom you can exchange and so forth. So this is very advanced and gives you an environment of high skills. The problem and the main issue is that it's very costly. All of a sudden, there is this possibility for each one of us on this planet to be using a personalized tutor that is going to help us learn and understand whatever we want to learn. And besides, to use that tutor as much as we want without being afraid of asking to repeat the examples or to rephrase the examples. And on top of that, the tutor was going to be extremely polite and always at your service. So just that, to me, is a fantastic transformation in the way we are going to learn, because it's going to be super cheap, it's going to be potentially hyper-personalized, and it's going to be quite enjoyable, because we are going back actually to an old thing that we learned from the great philosopher, which is the Socratic conversation. And with this chatbot, we're back to the Socratic conversation. So my example is that I didn't know how to code. I've started to learn how to code Python with GPT-4. And I've started to develop a couple of small programs. I'll give you one example. So I mentioned I'm a fiction writer. I have this book I talked about, which is 650 pages long, which is quite, a sizable size. If I would go to someone for translation in English, for example, it would cost me around 30,000 euros, something like that, and take 3 months or so also. Now, I've asked GPT-4, write me a Python code where you're going to split all the book and clean up the formatting and whatnot, and then use the API, and then tell me exactly how you're going to, and write up with the right prompt the translation for each of the different chunks, and then put that back me in the one novel, just an example. And at the end of the day, instead of that costing me $30,000, it cost me 94 cents. And it took 3 hours. But the interesting thing is that before that, it's not even using the API for GPT-4. I didn't know how to code at all. So, and I started to learn that via this mentoring, via AI. Now, I said orchestration. Why did I say so? Because what I realized also is that there are already an incredible amount of learning available, for example, with video, with YouTube, with all that. There's a library of learnings which is just astounding, or what we call tutorials. But really, if you have a generative AI prop which can orchestrate, identify what's the right piece for you, that is going to be a game changer. And it's not exactly there yet, but all the pieces now are here. You can already have your own little prof, It's really a matter not of 10 years, but max 3 years or so, even less perhaps, if someone is really dedicated to develop this kind of offering, to have a perfect tutor for an extremely minimal amount of money, which is the one thing which is outstanding. So I really want to stress that. And by the way, if you allow me to open up the lens and just talk about why this topic is extremely important for the stability of democratic society. We lived in very polarized. Do you allow me, or maybe no? I'll continue.
No, it's fine. It's also an interesting question that maybe we will not discuss it in the research itself, but it does interesting in general on the implications also. So you started to say about the democratic, why it's good for democratic society,
and it's one of the indirect positive effects. There's something interesting that has been studied on social inequalities and the fact that social inequalities actually reduce the ability for lots of students and kids to learn better. In psychology, when you're told to kids you're great, they are going to do great. And when you're told to kids you're bad, they are going to do bad, even though, say, at the start, net, you have kids which are at the same level. The way we imprint by psychological effect, the ability for kids to learn better or less. And I say kids, but I'm a big kid. We all are, at this, within that realm. Now, if we all have this common learning, that actually there is a leveling up system that helps all of us to increase, but actually to also reduce inequalities among us, just knowing that it exists might create more positive feeling among students, so that they will even learn better, because they know that at the end of the day, inequalities are going to be reduced. And so the positive feeling of leveling up itself is going to enhance and increase the fact that indeed there will be leveling up and an increase in learning. So all I'm saying is that the direct effect is that we are going to have an incredible new system of learning that is going to have a leveling up effect, in the sense that everyone is going to increase their level of education, but provided it's really catered to all categories of population, and this is a big if, I understand, but provided we do that, there is this ability for everyone to get it, and then everyone to level up, which is, by the way, what also we see already in the use of AI, not in learning. We see that in consulting, we see that in law school, we see that in a lot of professional works. I mean, there's a couple of studies now, about 4 studies that I pointed out, one from MIT, one from the National Bureau of Economic Research with Eric Brinjolfsson, a small one from the University of Minnesota Law School, another one from Harvard Business School. We've actually, inside the team, a guy I love to follow, which is Ethan Mollick. And all the studies go to the same point, that everyone increase in performance, whatever is the task. But on top of that, the one who increase the most are the one who are the lowest, in the scale, the lowest skilled the most. These are the ones who actually increase the most, and thus there is this leveling up effect. And what I'm hinting at, it's an hypothesis, but you apply that to education. And again, we have a whiff of that with a small study in the University of Minnesota Law School, study from this month of August. But that does show that, again, after people use AI to learn and to respond, there is this reduction in the differences in top score and low scores. So there's an element of leveling up. So direct effect, grad professors, indirect effect, leveling up, and then indirect effect, which is what I mentioned, the fact that if everyone understands that there's a leveling up, it's going to bring a more positive effect feeling that itself is going to enhance even more the fact that people are going to be okay to learn because they feel that at the end of the day, everyone is going to win. And actually, the one who are the most at bottom are going to win more than the one at the top. So
I wish that sounds amazing, and I wish that sounds really amazing benefits. And also, let's hope it's going to happen in the education sector, right? So we talked about the benefits, right? We talk about the positive approach to AI and how it could advance. But what do you see as the main risk, challenges, or ethical concerns associated with educational uses of generative AI? Of course, in the education sector.
So if you talk about risk, there are lots of typical
risk, challenges, and ethical concerns.
Yeah.
Yes.
The main risk, evidently, is whenever you have a human-machine interface and you're dealing with a machine, there's the risk that you are going to actually rely too much on the machine for your thinking. You will depend too much on the machine. So one thing, evidently, is for professors not to be able to grade the students because all the students are going to use that system, and thus you're going to see the leveling up effect. And then the professors, but because they used to, if the professor didn't adapt to the changing condition, indeed, they'll have difficulties to dissecate who's good, who's bad, because everyone is going to level up. The problem is a problem of adaptation, because the professor then need to understand that what needs then to be further challenged is not the learning of expertise, but some new dimensions in the way we create content and domain. So it's not an ethical issue, it's an efficiency issue, but which deals with the evolution of how we're going to create value and content and whatnot. Because we are going to rely more and more, less and less on the verification that we know and expertise, and more on the ability that we can use different sets of expertise that we don't necessarily need to master, actually, but to fulfill a goal where we're very clear on what is the goal we want to achieve, and also to be creative. And then the last point is to be more persistent. Anyway, so it feels very philosophical, what I'm saying. I understand that. But actually, at the end of the day, what we do is really much related to I know it's complex questions, but what we do really relates to the way we are going to change work. Work is not going to be about restating an expertise that we know. That will be useless because we'll have machine with expertise. Now, there are caveats to that. I get to that point. There are big caveats to that, evidently. But in the routine work, there are big caveats to that. But still, it's the value of work, or if I would go to David Autor O-ring, where's really the beef, where's really the value? It's going to be less on I know expertise and more on I know how to be creative with different sets of expertise I can exploit via AI, and B, I know what's the goal I want to reach and what I want to get there. Yeah. Again, that seems very theoretical, but I'll give you an example. When I'm building, I'm building, I'm a real estate promoter, and I say that my father is an architect, so it's a conversation I have often with my father. You're a real estate promoter and you want to create, say, a new hotel. Being the promoter, it's complex because you need to know exactly what you want to achieve with this program, for what clientele, for what purpose, and whatnot. And often you may go into this type of program without clear ideas of what you really want to achieve. The job of each one of us is going to be better at trying to understand what we really want to achieve. And mind you, the more it's complex, the more it's not easy. And actually, because expertise is easy, the ability to combine all these elements is going to be more complex because we're going to do more things. And thus trying to understand better what I really want to achieve, that is going to be a key question, okay? So you'll have that, you'll have creativity, you have also element of persistence. And I'm saying that with regards to education, because education used to be about checking that you know expertise, and it's going to be less and less about checking you know expertise, and more about how do you combine all of that by being creative and by bringing something new and valuable to the table. Because this is, at the end of the day, what is going to be asked of you as a worker after you've done education. Okay, and education is here to help you being a worker. So now, so there's this problem.
Yeah, but if we talk about education, but let me just focus that, or trying to focus that. So if we're talking about education of kids, right? And so first of all, you assume that the purpose of education systems is to prepare kids to the work, to be a worker, right? In the industry. There is a lot of debates here in Israel, at least, on if that's the purpose of the education system. But also that's one assumption, and the other assumption that you're actually saying that we want to teach them, right, or we want to make them with a higher level of thinking, of synthesize information and expertise from different fields, and not just be an expert in one field. That actually one thing that I do understand that you're trying to say. So that's the risk, actually. If I'm trying to answer the question, the risk is that the education system maybe need to adapt to how to teach differently, or does it know?
So
or
first, I'll be blunt.
Sorry.
I'm a Marxist, and to me, infrastructure determines the superstructure. And when I mean worker, I don't mean like a worker. You know, a startup entrepreneur is a worker. You know what I mean? Someone who is going to produce value. Okay. And at the end of the day, I know that education can be done for many different reasons, to be a good citizen, to be a lot of things. But if you are not producing people able to create value when they're adult in society, you know, then there'll be a big problem for society. So maybe it's a very utilitarian view of education, but you know, let me put out and and produce value, and also evidently there's producing value, and of course, and also securing society. But I'm not talking about military action, but you know that's also part of it. You know, it's producing and defending value. Let's put it this way. Now, a few elements of issues with AI. I mentioned a caveat when I said expertise is going to be a given. So we will not ask people to restate expertise. The caveat is if we rely too much on the machine, and if one day the machine is kaput, is out, what do we do? Okay, so that's an element of safety, but we will ask still that future citizens will be able to know some elements of knowledge, of expertise, able to rebuild a system of expertise if all of a sudden the machine is out.
So I need you, but Guy, I need to, I need you to summarize this question actually. So if in a sentence, what are the main risk in AI, in generative AI, of course, in education? In a sentence, what is the main risk? Yeah.
First, there's the obvious risk of there is the risk of stopping to think and relying too much on the machine. And stopping to think, that means, for example, instead of me trying to think about a solution, I just ask the machine to give me the solution. Okay, that's an obvious one. Second risk, there is the risk of not enough using the machine to think about the solution. And why I say that? Because in the work environment of tomorrow, and tomorrow starts already today, those AI systems will be everywhere. And so if you don't use it enough, then there again, you will not be preparing the future students to be the future good citizens. And within that, there is an additional risk, when I say not to use enough, is not to use enough to what will be the future goals of the workers of tomorrow, which should be not that much to rely on expertise, but to actually be creative in solution making, whatever the field, and thus to be able to play and perhaps even to develop your services and products and so forth. So it's rely too much, don't use enough, and don't use with a proper goal of the society that will be built with AI, which will be more creative, and also, as I meant to say, more creative, and also push back the question on the user of what do you really want. It's like a startup. When you create a startup, you are going to go through different iterations because initially you have an idea, but it's not the right idea of what it may end up being. The same thing, with and your interaction with AI. Yeah. So and those elements of being the right value creator in the society of tomorrow, that needs to be embedded in the way you are going to learn. Otherwise, education will not provide you what is one of the, perhaps to me, the one main utilitarian good of education, which is to make you the right value creator for the society you're living in.
Okay, thank you for that. Let's go to the next question. I hope we be on time. So let's take it to the policymakers, right? So what recommendation would you have for policymakers regarding regulating or providing guidance on generative AI in education?
Okay. So I think it will be around the three main risks that I mentioned. Okay. Risk number one, this issue of relying too much on generative AI. That is, I use generative AI to give the answer instead of me thinking. Okay. And for that, we will need elements of blue book exercise, areas where we don't use at all generative AI, because we need the people to think by themselves. Second risk, I hope you follow me because it's complex. Second risk, the fact that we don't use enough generative AI. That is, for the regulator, we want also that they are going to use, the students are going to use a lot of generative AI, and thus they would have time also to explore with generative AI. And so if I was a regulator dealing with education, I would insist of having two types of exercise. But as I'm saying that, I'm just, to some extent, I'm repeating what people like Ethan Mollick are already saying, and to which I totally agree with. You will need exercise without the computers, where you just want to see how people can deal without the machine. And you will need exercise with the computers, and actually with a lot of AI and thinking about AI. And ideally, you would have exercises that are fit to the way we are going to work with the systems in society. That is, again, explore lots of experimentation, lots of exploring, lots of iteration till I understand as quickly as I can what I really want, and lots of creativity. So if I'm a regulator and I want to rephrase and reframe the educational curriculum for lots of students, it's a big endeavor, but I will have those three axes. Elements where the base learning are still set, okay, and without any computing or any about any AI. But then also exercise where I will use AI and I will actually test students on their ability to use AI, and to test students on not only the fact that they use AI, but the fact that they use AI in a creative way, helping them to, as quickly as possible, find out what is that they really want to express via all these tools. And then let me add the last fourth point, education about cybersecurity of a system, because I'm sorry, because at the end of the day, we're still dealing with IT and the basis, and with also all those, the understanding of the current issue with cybersecurity, or issues in general that we have, confabulation, hallucination, and all that, and how we test for that. And how we think about if I wanted to develop a AI system of red teaming to make sure that I have something which is safe and so on and so forth. Okay, so the basics, we're already starting the basics of any IT systems, okay, but then adding that to, and again, this is really an evolving science now, or evolving art now, let's put it this way, of the basics of cybersecurity and ethical security, for AI systems. So 4 points. That will be my.
Thank you for that. So actually, but actually you did. I think you also answered the next question accidentally, but I will ask it anyway. If you want to elaborate maybe more, the next, because we talked about the regulators, we talked about the policymakers, but now the next question is, we're talking about the educators themselves, the administrators themselves in education. So what suggestions would you have for educators or administrators looking to integrate generative AI into curricula or institutions? So somehow you did answer that, but maybe a manager, right? Educators of a huge school is in front of you. What would you suggest him to do with this technology?
Well,
maybe you suggest something else.
I will
right?
just dive deeper. Sorry for my English. Again, as I said, Blue Book exercise, which means that I need to know what are the core basics that I want students to know if the machine breaks out. What is the minimum that people still need to know to rebuild the machine or to operate at minimum without the machine? Okay, that's one thing. The second one I mentioned is to use AI. And beyond that, so if there was an exercise, I would say, you know what, develop to me, integrate a solution to a problem that will include an AI service. For example, one of the new GPTs, not the GPT, but the new GPTs that anyone can now develop with OpenAI, or do that with whatever you want, and develop code to me, including those GPTs, that is going to respond to the problem, to the assignment that I've given to you. I don't want to see any report. I want you to give me a fine-tuned LLM or a GPT that is going to respond to the problem that I'm giving to you. So I give you an example. How do you deal with, say, communication in terms of crisis? Okay. And the assignment will be, I don't want you to give me the nice report. I want you to give me a chatbot that is going to help me respond the right way whenever, in terms of how I communicate, whenever I have a crisis situation. That's what I want.
Wow. Okay, that sounds good.
And it's super easy. I mean, it's, and when I'm saying that, why I'm saying that? Now, I have an intent, and when I have an agenda. I'm saying that because I truly believe that the way work is going to evolve is not just, hey, I have a problem, give me, the idea to solve a problem. It's going to be, hey, I have a problem, and give me the idea and the AI service that encapsulate that idea that is going to solve me the problem.
Do you believe that every solution can be, do you really honestly believe that also, of course, regard education, every solution can be solved with AI, generative AI?
No, nothing is solved. Nothing is perfect in this world. But yeah, you can do much better than just giving a piece of paper. But of course, there'll always be a problem. Thank God. Otherwise, what's the point in living?
Yeah. So you're saying that it's a tool that the student has to or must use to amplify their abilities to solve the problems that is given to them. That's what you're actually. And also, when you're saying that, you assume that most of the learning in the education system occur by problem solving.
It should be.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's another question. But yeah, and why do I put the situation, I frame it this way?
Yes.
Because this is what expected to any value creator, any citizen. And I restate that even more so, that expertise will be available everywhere via IT systems with AI. We are moving into a world, and I really want to stress that, where expertise will be commoditized. It's very hard to understand, especially in university areas where you have great professors, great diplomas, and they've built their power within a human organization, which is a university, based on the high achievement of their expertise. But the problem is that it's all commoditized now because of AI. So the key point will not be the fact that you are the only one to know about something, because there's a very high chance that there'll be an AI that is copying about what you know, and that can be used with any other guys, in your neighborhood or elsewhere on the planet. But the problem then will be, okay, how do I use this expertise to solve an issue? Because at the end of the day, what's the purpose of expertise? It's not for big professors to have high diplomas and nice corner office in universities. You need expertise because you want to solve problems, because we want to live better.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Yeah.
Okay. So the key thing here will be problem solving.
So I agree with you. Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree, and I think it's really interesting, this talk also about in general the education system, how it works when let's hope with problem solving, right? And the concept that you said about the expertise, and actually let's rephrase it as a democratizing expertise, right? Everyone can take the expertise. You don't need an expert. You can be an expert with Amplify AI, and it's amazing. I will jump and have
yeah. and stress democratized, that's right, or commoditized.
Right, exactly.
And when I mean commoditized, I mean there's no more high value in expertise. The value is shifting somewhere else.
Maybe, but also, if you are an expert in a field and that use AI, will get better results than a novice.
Yes, but then you'll have level up. And you go to the problem of another problem, to the effect of democratization. And with democratization, you have reduction of the value of being the only one to know how to use this expertise.
That's there's a I believe that will be an entire a lot of research on that also in the near future. So I will jump into the next question, more complicated one. In your opinion, in under what circumstances is the use of generative AI in educational setting appropriate and ethically acceptable? And when would it be inappropriate or unethical?
Okay, let's start with the second one, which to me is the hardest.
Yeah, really.
Okay.
Okay.
From what I've seen, yeah, no, really. So evidently, this goes to the point again of we need to be able to operate without machines as a safety measure, because machine can, go out, be offline, and beyond that, we need some element of control of the machine, which is a tricky thing.
Okay.
But by the way, one element of the control is to try to know what I really want to achieve and not to have a machine tell me what I want to achieve. The only thing, volunteer will needs to reside in the helm of the human user and not be given by the machine. Machine can give options, but final choice, which is the expression of the will, must be only but at the end of the human user. Okay. So
but also that's not a real choice also, because you're choosing from the options that the machine gave you.
So now that's a good one, but we need to program the machine so that they give us options, the right ones. And so what is behind the right ones, I don't know. But if we lose agency, there are many things we lose, especially the element of control. Anyway, so where would that be? What type of use would be unethical? So evidently, if you would have psychological effects, AI system with psychological effects that could create, say, a emotion environment or such an environment where, again, you create a decrease in the agency of your students because they're shocked, because they're conditioned, because they're forced into something. So this is definitely one element where AI, but AI just amplifying what already exists, like when you have, bad professors who would be very mean or would put high pressure on the students, they're already decreasing the agency of a student, okay? And create an environment also where you make believe that there is a right or wrong answer and not leave an element of experimentation. AI is not something new to that, it's already the environment. AI maybe can amplify that, but anyway, that would not be the right use of AI. So not to give the right element, the right basics so that there's still human control even though the machine is out, or to have machines that is going to reduce the sense of agency by the student, okay, this would be to me definitely non-ethical use of the machine. Okay, so again, an easy example is just using AI to cheat, evidently. But it's definitely an example where instead of thinking by myself, I replace my thinking or my exercise of my cognitive exercise by something which is done by the machine. So that's definitely the type of replacement which is not good. This would be the environment where using AI would be unethical. Where would that be ethical? Everywhere. Everywhere that where you can explore further, test further, experiment further, which is basically what you can do with generative AI. Now, of course, there are currently limitations to AI. Okay, I mentioned the generative AI. I mentioned the issue of hallucination, confabulation. So students always need to check the sources of what comes out of the machine. That's current, but that needs to be done. The other thing is it's a general element is that there's so much still hallucination with the systems that you would not be able to use them for kinetic systems, things that would move, because it's just too dangerous. Because here you go into another level of risk. Okay. I would also state that today, because of the cyber limitations of this type of system, it is very dangerous to use to provide personal information into those generative AI, because there's a risk of data leakage and the risk of loss of privacy. So here, at the end, actually, I'm referring to cybersecurity conditions to the use of those generative AI as of 2023. Some experts may say, unfortunately, those conditions may be perpetual because these are the actual limitation of that technology of generative AI. Some of the experts may say yes, but actually, if you use additional systems, you may actually reduce the cyber risk to the point where, at least for students, it's not going to be such a big deal. This is a technical question to me.
Do we have time, guy, for two more questions? Last questions?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
So, in your opinion, this is an important one. Before we enter the generative AI to education system. So, in your opinion, how should educators or policymakers assess the risk associated with generative AI, and why it's an important question, right? And I will give an example. New research found toxicity levels when you give a persona to ChatGPT, Muhammad Ali, or Albert Einstein, or whatever persona you give him, he has a toxicity level. So if you're a grown-up and you have critical thinking, or even a young adult and you have critical thinking, that's fine. But if you're really young, right, a child in the education system, and you use it and you give a persona, you can be affected with the toxicity levels of the answers that you get, right? So what you said is an advantage, right? The personal tutor, maybe Albert Einstein, that we got him on a wrong day, let's say, with toxicity level, can affect negatively on a child. And maybe the use of it in the long run can also cause a huge risk, right, in development in a young child mind. So, so in your opinion, again, after framing it, how should educators and policymakers assess the risk associated with generative AI, right? They want to assess it before maybe they use it. Yeah.
Yes, and that's why I mentioned the element of personalized path. Personalized is your level of education. It's also evidently your personality traits. And what will fit better. I mean, again, I'm not saying that those systems are ready now, and that's not what I said.
Mm-hmm.
But I said that all the different data bricks are available for, in say, 3 to 5 years from now, we start to have personalized tutor that can fit with the age, with the personality, and they can do that. I mean, Miral Kozinski at Stanford has tried to demonstrate, this is a little bit contested now, but let's put it on the table, that those new LLMs, the ones since 2022, were able to pass the test of the theory of mind. That is, they're able to have a sense of the personality or the intent, at least, of the user of the LLM. They can sense, what they really want. Somehow, I mean, saying they can sense, it's an anthropomorphic projection. It's not the right word, okay? But they can infer information so that if you use that, potentially it can be reused so that you can redirect the LLM to a behavior adaptive to the person which is on the other side of the screen. Also proven that the element that they can infer probably the personality traits either of people they talked about or potentially of the users, provided the users give enough information. So what I mean to say is that, again, there is potentially a lot of bricks. I don't know if it's enough, but a lot of bricks to try to better understand the personality traits of the users, and that can be used afterwards, evidently, as an element of a personalization for the learning path of that user. And so, do we have to be careful about that? Of course, we have to be careful about that. We have to be careful, evidently, and that's a key point, actually. Not only those LLMs are quite versatile, but the way they are being distributed is via chatbot, in a way. It's a conversational bot. And I mentioned the idea that's a positive view of it. It's a Socratic discussion, and indeed, and I find it a fantastic way to go back to the Greek philosophers and which one of them we can learn with some sort of tutor. But evidently, we have to be careful. We have the start of digital mental health products that sometimes that can be very helpful, by the way, to try to check on the effect on the psychology of the user. This is for mental health. I wouldn't see any problem that this should be done also for the students that will use that type of new personalized chatbots to make sure that indeed the interactions is a proper one. And that's probably something that should be tested, especially when you're dealing with young children, evidently. But again, I want to stress one thing, is that it can be also very positive, perhaps even better than interaction with adults. And I give you one example, which is not in education, but which is in healthcare, with generative AI used to give medical recommendation as GPs, okay? And actually what came out is that, so these were, I forgot what was the generation, but the results in terms of quality of the medical recommendation were quite good. And again, leveling up, I mean, no humans, but really in terms of the quality, which was judged afterwards, was quite good and really much, reduce the distances between a bad recommendation, a good recommendation compared to human beings, okay? So very good recommendations, not the top one, okay, that you could get with human, but in a much narrow band, very good ones. And what people stated afterwards, that the generative AI doctor felt as being more empathic than the regular human being, the regular doctor.
That's an amazing results. Yeah.
And I really want to stress that, because we have good professors which are being very empathic, but we all have had in our past very bad professors which were not empathetic at all, or not empathetic to all the students.
Mm-hmm.
Now we may have a chance to have that type of tutor who will be empathetic, if they are programmed the right way, to all of the students. And thus, yes, we have to be careful about the psychological interacting, and we might even have situations with people with specific mental health conditions where we have to be extra careful. But what I'm sure is that it may be as bad as how it's already dealt with human beings today, and perhaps better.
Wow, okay. So the last question is, that was an amazing answer actually, but the last question is, any other perspectives you would like to share regarding the ethics of generative AI in education?
No, I'll just restate something which is coming from my own utilitarian consequentialist view of ethics, is that yes, there are risks, but there are so much positives to it that not using it to the max is a negative in ethical terms.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And that's my point.
So that's an amazing saying. So, Guy, thank you very much for the interview. Just one last thing. Do you approve to publish this interview to make it accessible for the public?
Yes, yes.
Thank you very
It's going to be too long into rambling, but yeah, sure.
thank you very much.